even hours after confirmation that Charlie Kirk had passed away, it was not hard to find people just tweeting saying he deserved it, suggesting he had it coming because he was having these debates. So even in, I think, the grief stage, and I think it's fair to say that this story is completely dominating America right now. You have a situation where it's obviously hit the White House hard, but also since the news first broke, cable news has only had stories about Charlie Kirk, really. There's not really
Yeah.
anything else anyone is talking about. And there is a pushback from parts of the left. There's also, as you say, the slightly more nuanced is the wrong word. You have some just doing pure vitriol. You have some saying, oh, well, I didn't. I, I was quite happy for him to leave the arena, but not in this circumstance, which again, as you say, does suggest that they think he was a character who had something naturally coming their way. And I think the question now is how does this play out in the coming days and weeks?
Well, good morning, Katie. The big news still is the shock which has afflicted the country in the wake of the shooting of Charlie Kirk. What is the latest we know?
Sorry. Okay. So the latest we know is obviously a suspect has been arrested. We hear that they were in a Republican family, but they were the left-wing member. And I think, and we've also heard from Charlie Kirk's wife, who's given a statement. She's given a speech. It was quite an emotional speech where she spoke about losing her husband. She spoke about the fact that she'd had to have conversations with their two very young children about where their daddy is. And she also said that for those who, wanted Charlie Kirk to go away, if that was the intention when it came to the decision to shoot him, that they were not going to get their wish. She said Turning Point, which is the organization which Charlie Kirk founded in 2012, is going to come back stronger. It's going to be bigger than ever. So I think there's been a statement of intent from Charlie Kirk's wife and the Turning Point movement.
The reaction over here has, of course, been appalled shock, but an awful lot of people on the left on social media that I've read are saying this is dreadful, but, and then it's in that but that you hear the caveats as to why maybe it wasn't so appalling after all. It's a sort of grotesque caveat. Is that kind of thing happening in the States?
Yeah, there is an element of that. I also think if you look on social media, there, even hours after confirmation that Charlie Kirk had passed away, it was not hard to find people just tweeting saying he deserved it, suggesting he had it coming because he was having these debates. So even in, I think, the grief stage, and I think it's fair to say that this story is completely dominating America right now. You have a situation where it's obviously hit the White House hard, but also since the news first broke, cable news has only had stories about Charlie Kirk, really. There's not really
Yeah.
anything else anyone is talking about. And there is a pushback from parts of the left. There's also, as you say, the slightly more nuanced is the wrong word. You have some just doing pure vitriol. You have some saying, oh, well, I didn't. I, I was quite happy for him to leave the arena, but not in this circumstance, which again, as you say, does suggest that they think he was a character who had something naturally coming their way. And I think the question now is how does this play out in the coming days and weeks? The fact they now have a suspect in custody, as we understand it, taken there or encouraged to go there by their father, I think does mean that you are bringing some closure to this to a degree, but there's so much anger in the movement about what's happened. And you have some allies of Charlie Kirk saying, everyone be calm. Charlie Kirk was the person who engaged with the left, and he wouldn't want this to, descend into a violent protest. But then you have other figures saying, well, hang on a minute. Charlie Kirk was, in their view, one of the more friendly figures in the MAGA movement. And look what happened to him. So why do we have any tolerance for the left? So I think we're entering an uncertain time. And it does feel, when you speak to figures who have been in America a long time, seasoned Washington figures, they are saying, this is a watershed moment, but no one can quite decide what that is going to look like in a year's time.
No, indeed. Well, Charlie Kirk's obviously been a huge story over here, but it's been dwarfed a little, I suppose, by the resignation or sacking, it's probably better to put it, of Peter Mandelson, the ambassador to Washington. How's that gone down there?
Well, what's interesting, following on from our conversation just now, is it just hasn't been a very big story in America. So through the week, you could see from the news, from speaking to colleagues here, in London, that you had a situation where the pressure was going up and up and up, and there was a sense, I think, in London, it was inevitable Peter Mandelson would have to resign. And I had various people saying, well, how come Peter Mandelson doesn't know he has to resign? Why hasn't he resigned yet? But I think part of the answer, and there will be different elements, is in Washington, D.C., it just hasn't been a factor. And that's before what happened with Charlie Kirk. Because Epstein, of course, is a big story in America, but it largely relates to the president himself, Donald Trump, who's in those files. So if you say that Peter Mandelson has to go because of his letters to John, if you say that Peter Mandelson has to go because of his letters to Jeffrey Epstein, it does, of course, raise questions about what
Well,
questions
of
Donald
course.
Trump has to answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would have thought that that was one reason why it might have resonated more strongly. Oh well, we will wait and see. We ought to mention Qatar, given that the USA taken a slightly odd stance if you look at how they've supported Israel throughout the post October the 7th crisis, in condemning Israel for its attacks on Doha. That must have raised eyebrows, and particularly amongst Republicans, I would have thought.
To a degree, I think the White House briefing Caroline Leavitt gave this week, where she said, that they voiced disapproval effectively at what Israel had done, I think was in the moment taken as quite a stern ticking off. However, in that same briefing, some Republicans and certainly Israelis will point you to the fact that it was still said that despite the fact that the president didn't approve of these strikes, he thought this could be a pathway to peace. And therefore, was this the very public telling off of Israel without much behind the scenes to really punish them or, almost telling off a child about actually grounding them? So I think the jury is out in terms of how strongly the White House is really, denting their relationship with Israel over this.
Fair enough. Well, we're all polishing the bunting and getting out our MAGA hats because, of course, there's a Trump visit on the cards. Is Donald looking forward to it as much as we are, do you think?
I think he is looking forward to the state visit. I'll also be back in the UK, so I'm looking forward to it too. But I think we know that this is a president who ultimately loves the royal family and has affection for the UK. Now, often it might not feel like that because that affection can be criticism, whether it's free speech, energy policy. But if you look at Donald Trump's connections through Scotland, through his mother, there's definitely a warmth towards the UK. And one of the subjects that DC journalists will say if they're having an interview with Donald Trump and they need to keep it going, they'll often ask about the royal family because they just know he'll be so animated, he'll want to keep talking. So I think he is looking forward to it. I still think it could be uncomfortable for Keir Starmer in places, even if the president has a good time.
Uncomfortable largely because of the Mandelson business, I suppose.
Well, we're going to have at least one press conference, we expect. And Donald Trump obviously does lots of press with the pool and with huddles as he goes about. And I think there's some quite uncomfortable questions potentially when it comes to Keir Starmer. You felt Peter Mandelson had to go about Epstein.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer, Keir Starmer, you felt Peter Mandelson had to go over Epstein. What do you think about Donald Trump's relationship? I think there could be some potential bruises that are pressed on the strip.